Bitcoin is now the new world reserve currency. It is no longer the US dollar. It is no longer gold. And you have the opportunity to get majority market share by buying equity into Bitcoin sooner. And this is the first time in all of history where you do not have to be a accredited investor to get into a new asset class before the institutions. Because what just happened is with these ETF approvals, institutions can now expose their funds to Bitcoin. And with the spot ETFs, they're required to buy Bitcoin on their books based on the number of clientele out of which they have actively purchasing their new ETF funds. And what this means for us is, as a retail investor, somebody who does not make over $200,000, $300,000 a year, somebody who does not have $1 million in liquid net worth, I have the opportunity to buy equity in this private entity before institutions were even legally eligible to get involved. This is the first time where we have the opportunity as a private retail investor to invest into an asset class before the institutions get involved, which means for us, we have the opportunity to get a majority market share when the institutions do bring in trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars into the new asset class known as Bitcoin. First, you need to understand what were the previous rules and regulations of having to be a accredited investor. What is a accredited investor? Why do you have to be an accredited investor to invest in IPOs? And what does this ultimately prevent us retail investors from getting access to that institution investors do have access to? Accredited investor is a term used by financial regulators, particularly in the United States, to refer to individuals or entities that are permitted to invest in certain types of securities offerings that are not available to the general public. What this means is that there is a large barrier to entry to invest in these high-risk, high-return asset classes. And the only way to build wealth, to build generational wealth, to become financially independent is by taking a big risk on a high-return asset class. That is the only way to build wealth, is by taking a risk, a high-risk, high-return on a business entity. And because you are not an accredited investor, because you are not already wealthy, the government believes that you are not educated and eligible to take this kind of risk in investing in this kind of asset class. And for the first time, Bitcoin is the only asset class where we, the people, are able to purchase equity in this IPO before institutions are legally eligible to get involved. This is huge, because what this means is that once the institutions get involved and they get approved, which is exactly what just happened, now we're going to have all of their capital and their funds enter into this new market, that of which us retail investors already have majority share of. So then they have to buy off of our supply, which then drastically increases the price, increasing the value of the assets that of which we purchased because we got involved before the institutions were legally eligible to get involved. Now, the script has been flipped completely backwards, because previously institutions can get involved in an IPO, they can get involved in a private company before it goes public. The institutions get majority market share, and then it's listed on the NASDAQ, on the public stock exchange, where then retail investors then buy up the asset class or buy up the company ticker, skyrocketing the value of the institution's equity in that IPO or that new startup company. With Bitcoin, the script has been flipped completely fucking backwards, because now it's us retail investors who can buy up all the equity before the SEC has regulated and made it eligible for then institutions to then buy up into Bitcoin, increasing the value of its equity, that of which we hold that equity. So this is the first opportunity in all of, at least my generation's history, where we have the opportunity to front end the institutions. We have the opportunity to fucking beat the institutions, take majority market share, and take the value of the equity that they currently hold in the world economy marketplace. So this is the first opportunity that we're going to have as a retail, as the small guy, to beat the big guy, the institutions. I got to take this phone call. Hello? Yeah, Matzo Drive. Sure thing. What can I do for you, John? So now what we need to know is why Bitcoin. The scam of fiat currency, the scam of the US dollar, the scam of every single currency that every single person is required to take part in, which is exactly why rich people don't hold their money in US dollars, because it's been debased. This is a chart representing the purchasing power of the US dollar over the last, I believe, 100 years. As you can tell by the chart, the currency has been completely debased into valuelessness. And what this chart shows you is that every retail investor, every small guy is getting fucked. If you are not wealthy, you cannot afford to purchase assets that appreciate in value. You are forced to store your economic energy. You are forced to store your wealth in US dollars, which, by the way, its value is halved every 4 years. So if you have $10 in 4 years, it's worth $5. The purchasing power is worth when you're comparing it to the price of commodities and other consumer goods. That's the underlying issue. Our currency is constantly getting debased because it is inflated away, because it is 100% completely manipulated by the Federal Reserve. And because you're poor and you don't own any assets, you're not actually building wealth. You're losing 50% of your purchasing power every 4 years. And what Bitcoin has done, has created a limited supply of only 21 million, that of which the entire world has access to. And we have now accepted the fact that the entire world economy is going to run on a Bitcoin standard from now on moving forward. And that is what the approved ETFs truly mean, is that the US dollar is now backed by the Bitcoin standard. We are no longer on a gold standard. We're no longer on a fiat currency standard. Every single fiat currency in the entire world is now backed by the Bitcoin standard. And what that means is that over time, as the 400 or 800 trillion dollars, all of this economic energy is going to be backed by the limited supply cap of Bitcoin. And by owning a share of that network before the economic energy is transferred into that network, you can obtain majority market share by being first, by being early, and massively increase your numerical value in the world economy. The fact that we have the opportunity to front run the institutions, the fact that we have this opportunity to get majority market share before we have institutional funds get involved in this network, the value of the network is directly proportional to the number of its users and how active those users are. And if those users are buying Bitcoin and they're holding it as a savings product, meaning that they're never selling these funds, that means that they have permanent active users that is going up in the number of users, which means that the value of the network is going up. And this is all based on what's called Metcalfe's Law. Metcalfe's Law states that the value of the telecommunications network, the value of any network, is directly proportional to the square of the numbers of users that is connected to the system. When institutions get involved, which they currently are, we have BlackRock buying thousands and thousands and thousands of Bitcoin, buying billions and billions and billions of dollars worth. When these institutions, when the top dogs start getting involved, this means that the value of the network in itself is going to drastically increase based on the value of the people joining the network. And we have these huge institutions that are getting involved. And for the first time, like I said before, you can own a majority market share of this network without having to be a accredited investor. The script has been flipped. Previously, financial institutions had the opportunity to buy in the ICOs, to buy in the small market cap companies, to buy in the private entities. They pretty much got a cheap pre-sale before they were listed publicly on the open stock exchange. And once those companies went public, now the retail investors have the opportunity to then buy into this network, to buy into those companies, of which the institutions were able to get in first when it was sold privately at a discount, and then their equity is worth substantially more because the retail investors get in after, and the institutions pretty much take the money of the retail investor. For the first time, Bitcoin has totally altered and flipped the script, where us retail investors can purchase our equity share first, and then the SEC has to regulate and create the rules and regulations for the financial institutions to get involved, which has just happened with the approval of the 8 ETFs. And now that financial institutions are getting involved, they are allocating all of their funds into this network, that of which I own majority market share of as a first previous investor. Do you understand? So by being first, by being early, you have the opportunity to get majority market share previous to the institutions getting involved without having to be a quote unquote credited investor, without having to have $1 million net worth, without having to make $300,000 a year, because that's ultimately what you are required to make in order to be considered an accredited investor, in order to make an investment in an ICO that Bitcoin would be considered if it was a private company entity and it was not completely decentralized and built on a blockchain, because it surpasses any governing entity. That's what Bitcoin does. It surpasses the rules and regulations of any governing entity. And now the governments are realizing that they either adopt this technology first, or their competitive government will adopt it before them, take majority market share, and will run the world in the next 15 years. So if you're a government, the intelligent decision to make is to adopt this stuff, and our government is finally realizing that it is vital to adopt this technology first, because it is inevitable that the fact that it will get adopted by the entire world, because it is a better, cheaper, more efficient, and more secure infrastructure and financial system for the population to live and work off of. And therefore, the government entities are soon going to be racing to get majority market share. And you, as the small guy, as the retail investor, have the opportunity to beat them, be first, and make a fuck ton of money by buying this stuff now. So that's all I got today. I'm psyched to be here. This YouTube journey is going to be a very fun, exciting time as we go throughout this bull market. Comment your thoughts on Bitcoin. Comment on why you think Bitcoin is going to zero if you truly actually believe that. And outside of that, what are your top picks for this bull run? What are your top niches? What should I start diving in and looking into when it comes down to other digital currencies outside of Bitcoin? Because we've been talking a lot of talk about the Bitcoin, and I want to start switching it up with this channel. So let me know what I should review next.